Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is with us. He's the man behind Brexit, former UK Independence Party leader. Nigel, it is ironic that these two world leaders are essentially on their way out. I'm wondering if you want to take any credit for either of them.
Yes, I mean, I'd like to kick them a little bit further out, frankly. I mean, what we've seen today with their joint statement is that the poor darlings are in denial. They simply can't face up to the fact that their worldview has taken an absolute beating in the year of 2016. It began with Brexit, the first brick out of the wall, and now we have a Trump presidency in the USA. And let me tell you, in 2 weeks' time, we have a rerun of the Austrian presidential election. And the last contest was scrapped because of electoral fraud and the possibility of a right-wing Austrian nationalist candidate winning. And we also have a referendum on December the 4th in Italy, where Renzi, the Prime Minister, is going for a power grab, which I think is going to be rejected. So the news for Obama and Angela is there's more of this to come.
OK, now you met with President-elect Donald Trump. It was just a few days ago. You were at Trump Tower. I think that's the first face-to-face meeting with a foreign politician, if I can put it like that, of all time. And I think at the time you said you wanted to be a bridge between Donald Trump and the Brits. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, look, Obama didn't like the United Kingdom very much, and he didn't think much of our relationship that we've had. And I mean, let's face it, over the last 100 years, we've shared a lot of triumphs and tragedies together, haven't we? You know, we've fought wars for liberty, democracy and freedom, and been, you know, at times very, very successful. Obama downplayed that. Trump is, well, of course, he's absolutely pro-American and pro-ordinary Americans, but he recognises there needs to be a better relationship with the UK, and that can start with trade and defence and many, many other things. And all I've said, having been accorded the privilege of spending time with the President-elect, is that if I can help the British government in any way smooth relations, not just with the President, but with the President's team, I'd be very happy to do so, because I believe it's in the interests of both of our countries.
All right, Nigel Farage, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us again, Nigel. We'll see you soon. Thank you, sir. All right.
For over 5 centuries, Monte dei Paschi has been behind some of Italy's great moments in history. It helped finance the Renaissance and sponsored Siena's famous Palio horse race. Now, the world's oldest bank has become its most endangered bank and the symbol of Europe's latest crisis.
Monte dei Paschi is something of a special case in the Italian banking system. There's no other bank that's really in quite such a dire state, and it could potentially be the first victim, I think, of a return of political instability.
From Spain to Slovenia, Eurozone countries have been cleaning up their lenders, except in Italy, where, paralysed by weak governments, the banks were left to rack up almost $400 billion worth of bad loans.
Viva l'Italia che dice sì e che non si rassegna alla paura.
Now, the country's Prime Minister wants more power to fix the problem and to kickstart an economy still stuck in the late 1990s. To do so, he's called a referendum on changing the constitution.
For Monte dei Paschi, a rejection of those changes could scupper its plans to plug a €5 billion hole in its balance sheet and force it into state hands. Another 7 lenders on life support face a similar predicament, and all of this has hit shares of Italy's banks, which are currently down 50% this year. Monte dei Paschi's stock is down by 80%.
Regardless of whether we get a yes or a no vote, the Italian banks are in very, very poor shape, and they are going to have a period of intense and painful reconstruction going forward.
But even if Matteo Renzi wins the vote, the success of Italy's financial sector is by no means guaranteed. New laws from Brussels have made it hard for him to bail out the banks without forcing investors to shoulder some of the burden too. That makes any rescue package political dynamite in a country where swathes of mom-and-pop savers hold some $250 billion worth of bank bonds. Unsurprisingly, all of this has led to a bleak mood on the streets of Rome.
I don't think there will be great changes in the economy, even if they are saying the banks will vote for no, and it will create a Great Depression. I think the situation will remain unchanged, unfortunately.
I am leaning towards the no, because they are all liars. The reality is they are only interested in their privileges. Politics are filthy. Even all of the publicity for the yes vote and the no vote, they're filling our heads with stupidity, so you vote for the lesser evil.
Which means the only thing Italians can bank on for now is uncertainty itself. Nina Dos Santos, CNN Money, London.
At what's going on here, because we obviously are aware of the economic crisis. They've got high inflation, so they're dealing with economic crisis at the same time as political crisis here.
Yes, certainly. The situation is fastly deteriorating on the ground. On top of the economy contracting, we expect the economy to contract at least 11.5%, inflation to reach 700%, already the highest in the world. There are very severe shortages of food and basic goods, including medicines. So children are dying, the elderly are dying in Venezuela, and a recall referendum against incumbent President Nicolás Maduro, which was expected to early terminate his mandate and pave the way for a new leadership in the country, especially after that National Assembly, controlled by the opposition, won by landslide in December, is being currently postponed towards next year, or being basically blocked. Now, timing here is crucial, because if a recall referendum had taken place this year, then the Constitution mandated fresh presidential elections within 30 days. Now, if it's postponed to next year, then the vice president, which is part of the ruling party, will conclude the mandate of Maduro in 2019, therefore paving the way actually for things to get even worse on the ground.
Will political change help?
Well, certainly it seems it will. I mean, the problem here is that the foreign exchange controls, the prime controls, basically this widespread wave of expropriations of food companies, of oil companies, the renegotiation of terms have affected confidence. No one's investing in Venezuela. Venezuela is a country which holds the largest proven oil reserves in the world, yet oil production has systematically been declining. One of the richest countries in the world has their population, basically starving, people dying in hospitals, there's no medicines. So basically, I think that the people are demanding change. And they did it in December. The people want to vote for a recall referendum. They want to decide whether Maduro stays or leaves. And basically, the government is blocking this. And it has to be said that the referendum have been acting as a sort of relief valve for the pressure of this economic, political, social crisis. And I think this humanitarian crisis that is taking place in Venezuela is threatening the borders, Colombia, the Netherlands and this, because if there's a social explosion, we could see this situation, this humanitarian crisis, taking its toll also in the region.
In a further sign that the attempted coup in Turkey was crumbling, busloads of soldiers surrendered to police earlier on Saturday at Turkish television channel TRT in Istanbul. The coup plotters had burst into the headquarters of the state-run broadcaster late on Friday, taking it off air. In Ankara, TRT's offices were also seized and gunshots heard, as a presenter was forced to read a pre-prepared statement saying the military had fully seized control to protect democratic order. The announcement also accused the government of eroding Turkey's secular rule of law. Turkish private broadcaster CNN Turk was also briefly halted during a live news broadcast as soldiers entered the studio control room. Video later released by the station showed troops walking into the building and up the stairs. Both CNN Turk and state broadcaster TRT are back on air.
We say thank you to every police officer and law enforcement agent who's out tonight protecting us, black, white, Latino, of every race, every color, every creed, every sexual orientation. When they come to save your life, they don't ask if you are black or white. They just come to save you. How or why people serving America are killed? We must not be afraid to define our enemy. It is Islamic extremist terrorism. for the purposes of the media, I did not say all of Islam. I did not say most of Islam. I said Islamic extremist terrorism. You know who you are. And we're coming to get you.
Now, if you're living in the US, would you prefer to live under US law or Sharia law? Well, you'd think the answer was pretty obvious, but that's not what one filmmaker discovered on the streets of Minnesota.
Do you feel more comfortable living under American law, or do you feel more comfortable living under Sharia law?
Sharia law. I'm a Muslim. I prefer Sharia law.
You prefer Sharia law over American law?
Of course, yeah. Of course, yeah.
Would you prefer to live in America or prefer to live in Somalia?
For me, I think it's Somalia.
Would you rather live in America or live in Somalia?
I would rather live in Somalia.
You'd prefer to live in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
Filmmaker Amy Horovitz gauged opinion in a mostly Somali neighborhood in Minneapolis, an area from which he says dozens of young Muslims go to join terror groups abroad. Horovitz says he's not against immigration, which he sees as a great benefit to the U.S., but he believes the alienation of American Muslims is growing and the trend is continuing.
These people are, for the most part, either born in the United States or they grew up in the United States. What you find among the Muslim immigrants in Europe and the United States is that the first and second generation are more radical than their parents. They're actually not only not integrating as time goes on, as generations come by, but there's a larger alienation as more time goes by.
I'm not Americanized. I just speak fluent, and I'm, you know what I mean, I'm articulate, and I can articulate what I'm trying to say, you know what I mean? That's about it. But other than that, I mean, as far as my culture and my preferences and everything, it's still Somali.
And the fact that the vast majority of young people who I asked would rather live in Somalia or in Saudi Arabia as opposed to the United States, it blew me away. So there's something about this pool of immigrants that has become very, very problematic for our country and for Western countries in general.
Now, Jeremy Corbyn has accused a Commons committee of bias against Labour after a stinging report accusing him of failing to deal with anti-Semitism in his own party. The Home Affairs Select Committee said that his failure had allowed a safe space within the party for those with vile attitudes towards Jewish people. But the problem goes much wider than Labour. Paul McNamara has been meeting members of the Jewish community in North London, and be warned, there is some strong language in his report.
It's the eve of Sukkot, and this Jewish community in North London is preparing for 7 days and 7 nights of festivities. But the streets are shared with a noticeable police presence, and a report released today might help explain why. Hate crimes against Jews have increased by nearly a third since 2010, according to the Home Affairs Select Committee report, and the volume and viciousness of online abuse is unprecedented. It's all news that comes as no surprise to the community.
We will get calls from visibly Jewish people, whether it's in London, North Manchester, Gateshead, Leeds, other places, who tell us that on a regular basis when they walk to and from synagogue, they get abuse shouted at them by people on street corners, by people from passing cars. They may get stones or coins thrown at them. And for too many people, this is something they feel they have to put up with because it's just part of being Jewish.
The report shows an 11% rise in anti-Semitic incidents in the first half of this year compared to 2015. It also shows the number of people in Britain with anti-Semitic attitudes rose by 50% in just 12 months. And as many as 1 in 20 adults in the UK could now be characterised as clearly anti-Semitic. Daniel and Theo are barely in their teens, children who say they've had vicious hate shouted at them by grown men.
We were getting onto a bus and a car was driving by, and seeing as we were wearing our suits and our kippah on our head, the car slowed down and shouted, "You Jewish."
I was just thinking, why do they feel that way just because we're Jewish? I just felt it was unfair, and I just hadn't experienced anything like this before.
As bleak a picture as this report paints of anti-Semitism across the whole of the UK, some of the most critical lines are reserved for the Labour Party, saying there is, quote, safe space for people with vile attitudes towards the Jewish people. It also goes on to say that on this issue, Jeremy Corbyn has shown, quote, a lack of consistent leadership.
Dozens of protesters shout and sing as parishioners with Bibles in hand try to make their way through the crowd.
And anyone that wants to come to church service also has to be allowed to walk through the crowd, okay?
Yellow tape and deputies kept protesters back. They weren't allowed inside, but their voices delivered frustration.
You do not get to steal my Jesus. You don't steal my faith. You're a disgrace to God's love.
That were heard loud and clear. Pride flags and posters fill the parking lot of Verity Baptist Church in Sacramento as protesters tried to get the attention of Pastor Roger Jimenez, who praised the Orlando mass shooting during Sunday's sermon. It was recorded and uploaded to YouTube.
Are you sad that 50 pedophiles were killed today? No, I think that's great.
Jimenez briefly came outside but turned back around as protesters continued to shout.
We are one pulse. It's one thing to personally say they don't believe in homosexual, but when they advocate the killing of people, it's just wrong. It's a crime.
It brought some to tears like Carol Nolan.
Because it promotes hate. And if we don't stop hating each other, we're not going to have a planet left.
Parishioners showed up with smiles as they were escorted inside to learn about the Bible. As for the teachings, Reverend Alan Jones of St. Mark's United Methodist Church thinks Pastor Jimenez may be taking the scripture too literally.
For example, I couldn't be wearing this shirt that I'm wearing today if I followed those laws because it says you shouldn't mix cloth. So polyester and cotton are forbidden under that law. So there are laws there that belong to a time and a place that no longer have relevance for us today.
Protesters may not have gotten the apology they were hoping for, but they were satisfied with being peaceful because for them, love wins.
And I hope and pray for that man because he needs it.
Another protest is scheduled Sunday. Reporting live in Sacramento, I'm Dana Griffin, KCRA 3 News.
A new synthetic killer drug known as Flakka is spreading rapidly across the United States and already causing an epidemic of overdose fatalities and acts of violence.
Talking about Flakka.
Flakka.
The drug is called Flakka.
Some have dubbed it the insanity drug.
And it's everywhere.
It's been described as the scariest drug in the world. More powerful than heroin or cocaine.
This is a synthetic drug that can alter your state of mind, raising excited delirium, body temperature, and literally losing their mind.
They're all experiencing like superhuman kind of strengths.
Or it takes 6 policemen to hold them down. That's a problem.
Psychotic breakdowns, hallucinations,
aggressive, violent behavior,
cannibalism and self-mutilation,
indiscriminate violence when Flakka takes over.
We are living in the context of the end of the age. We are a nation under judgment. But you think it's bad, wait until you see what really bad is.
We are here driving, and there's a guy that jumped on our hood of our car. It's insane.
Illinois, Ohio, Texas, Kentucky, California, and Florida, especially hard.
Florida is now the epicenter of the outbreak.
There's been many crazy stories of people having unbelievable strength.
Some people would have like superhuman strength. People have taken Flakka, and it's taken 6 police officers to hold them down.
People